Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Paul M. Feidenberg, Ph.D. We're going to be discussing his fantastic book, My Neighbor John, available for purchase through Amazon, barnesandnoble.com. But if you guys want to gather everything that Paul has to offer, do yourself a favor and go directly to his personal site, myneighborjohn.com. There, not only will you find more information on Paul himself, you'll find more information on this fantastic book, as well as find hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing page. So one more time, that's myneighborjohn.com. And guys, I will say that Paul was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business, Far Eastern Marketing Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, well, make sure you're giving yourself the best gift possible, and you're moving it through Far Eastern. And you can find out more information on them at fareasternmarketing.com. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Paul, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you so much for being a guest. How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much, Benji. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we're very much looking forward to this, and we appreciate having you as a guest, because the words of wisdom that we're going to be able to steal from you, I'm sure, are second to none. And we're absolutely looking forward to that, Paul. Now, before we go into the book, and I know we have so much information to cover, but let's hold off slightly. Start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself and your background, please.
Well, I'm an adjunct professor of geology at Hunter College. Actually, I'll be beginning my 20th year there. I also am a public high school earth science teacher in Lower Manhattan. I sit on the board of directors of the Bible Archaeology Search and Exploration Institute, or BASE Institute, and I have been seriously considering these topics that I've written about for going on 43 years, believe it or not. So
Wow.
It's been quite a journey that's still going on, and I love to share. So that's pretty much what I do for a living now, and that's a big blessing in itself.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Paul, thank you for relaying that. And let me be the first person to tell you here on our network, thank you for all the work that you have done and continue to do as an educator. My listening audience knows this already, and they're probably sick of me saying this. I had a very brief stint in education myself. I taught for 4 years. My significant other now, she's a high school teacher, and she's been teaching for about 15 years. And we both absolutely understand and value the importance of education, but also, again, we understand that from an educator perspective, teachers never get the amount of credit that they deserve for the amount of work that they do on a day-to-day basis. It's absolutely incredible. So thank you very much for all of the work that you continue to do, shaping and molding the minds of future generations.
Well, I'm honored by that. I hope I live up to your expectations, but thank you.
There you have it. Paul, without further ado, My Neighbor John. Tell us a little bit more about your book.
Well, the book is a story that is being told through the eyes of a young man in his 20s. His name is Samuel, about his incredible friendship that he had with a man named John, who he knew when he was very young, about 8 years old, and the adventure in which they both participated in the past. It literally changed his life. The man John was a well-known, friendly member of the community where Sam grew up, and he also ran the local fishing supply shop. And one day, John sees the boy, Samuel, literally being verbally attacked by an elder in his church in response to young Samuel's appreciation of scientific theory about the creation of the universe. And without hesitation, this nice, quiet, humble man, John, steps up not only to defend Samuel, but to subsequently engage the entire church and the public later on in a debate between those who refuse to take into account any view of the Bible with an appreciation of modern scientific discovery versus those who maintain the view that biblical inerrancy and scientific inquiry are indeed compatible. So for those interested in learning more, like you said, the website, myneighborjohn.com, will give you a little bit of a hint without giving too much away. but it's his account starts out, basically a recollection of this amazing event that changed his entire life.
Mm-hmm. Paul, next concept I want to go into, let's talk about inspiration. Now, first and foremost, what inspired you to write this narrative? I mean, what did you see in those around you that made you feel these words that you were putting on the page would be beneficial to the public at large?
Oh, that's a very good question, and that's probably why I decided to do a story rather than a treatise of some type. I had a student come up to me at Hunter one day, and she said to me, "I know that science disproves the Bible, but," and I was kind of like taken aback, and I felt compassion for her because it was almost like she was grimly resolved to accepting that, but wanted to ask a question anyway. And I think her eyes opened wide when I said, "Well, I personally do not believe that science disproves the Bible. I think it actually enhances its explanation of events in the Bible. It actually does not discount these things." And so we kind of proceeded from there. And I felt if one student's coming up, usually I find that even in my high school classrooms, most of the students there are of a mindset for that particular generation. And if one person's having a difficulty in understanding something, chances are there are others that way. And I felt that I was in a unique position based on all the things I've done through the years. I mean, field work, lab work, and considering some of these concepts that I could probably shed some really helpful light for people that ponder these heavier things, these important life questions, and especially when it comes to faith. So that's why I wanted to write this up as a story that was enjoyable. I think everybody loves a good story, and then hopefully in that way dispense some of what I've learned about so many of these different things that literally support and affirm the faith.
Sticking with the concept of inspiration, going a little further away from the book, though, in terms of writing itself, was this something that you always were passionate about? Was it a hobby of yours growing up? Were there artists that inspired you, writers that inspired you? Talk to us a little bit more about that love for writing and where that passion and inspiration comes from.
That's very funny you should say that, because I always loved reading good stories. And as I grew up in the 70s, when I started to really read for pleasure, if you will, I was a big Star Trek fan. I absolutely loved Star Trek, the original series. And novels would come out, and I would read them, and I didn't like them. The first few that came out, they didn't pull me in. They didn't pull me into the characters. It was almost a burden to read it until one came along. My sister gave me a gift, I think a birthday present, maybe it was, or a Christmas present. And a woman, Diane Carey, wrote a book called Dreadnought. And it was amazing how it just drew me in. And the characterization was so incredible. The next thing I know, a year later, I got another book from my sister as a gift by the same woman. Well, to make a long story short, I read every single thing she ever wrote. And later wrote to her myself. My late wife and I were invited up to Michigan to spend a weekend with her and her husband at some point. And we talked about writing, and I gave her a short story, and she said I had I had some talent, which made me feel wonderful when your icon of a writer says that to you. And I love the power of a good story, and telling a story, even if it's verbal, if you can tell a good story and accomplish the task of not only entertainment but enlightenment and getting people to project beyond it, I think that is very self-satisfying or gratifying. Let's put it that way. That you've actually done something that's helpful to another person.
Absolutely. Again, here on the line with Paul M. Feidenberg, Ph.D. We're discussing his fantastic book, My Neighbor John, available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or directly through his personal site, myneighborjohn.com. Paul, next question that I'd love to go into. I know that this is a fictional narrative, but a lot of times even fictional narratives have a lot of research that has been conducted. Talk to our listening audience, Paul. What type of research did you do in preparation for this book?
Well, I'll tell you something. The event that Samuel goes through is an actual real event that either fortunately or unfortunately, depending upon how people find it in the book. But basically, it happened to me when I was literally, my parents had moved the summer after freshman year when I was going to Boston University, and they moved to a rural or almost rural community. My father took a job in New Jersey, and we were living in New York, and my mother and I went to a church service, and a fella got up to close the congregation in prayer, and he led by saying he knew the Lord did not create the universe with a big bang. And at that point in my life, I had been reading Robert Jastrow's God and the Astronomers, and it was amazing how it fit the Genesis account. In fact, John Mather, who received the Nobel Prize for his work on the Big Bang Theory, is a Bible-believing Christian. My sister interviewed him years later. I mean, talk about coincidences. I actually don't think there are in life, but I was aghast that this farmer. Now, farmers are very practical people, and some of them are actually quite brilliant in genetics and genetic research, believe it or not. But it really bothered me to the point where I got up at the end and I walked up to the pastor and I explained. I said, I don't think that dissing that theory is correct. I think it actually supports our beliefs. And the pastor was very, very conciliatory. He encouraged me to contact him, make an appointment, come and talk to him. It was a summer. I had plenty of time to do that. So I did have a job, but I made time. I went over, and I found absolutely no support for what I was trying to say. He's a very nice man, but he just did not agree with what I was trying to say. That was how I perceived it. And this story begins with that very same question. And is it appropriate to consider things like that? Does the Big Bang Theory have anything to do with the creation story in Genesis? And I think it's fair to consider it. And I think it's fair to understand the implications of what science has said about it. I think Christians will be amazed. I think scientists will be equally amazed when they examine what each account is saying and how they dovetail. So that became the basis of the rebuke that Samuel experiences in the beginning of the book at 8 years old. And what ensues after that with John involves a serious look at scientific discovery using scientific tools and analysis and what it actually can do, if anything, to enhance a person's walk of faith. And I think people will be amazed at some of the things that are brought up. Each topic that I felt was pertinent, there was so much I wanted to include, I couldn't include it all, can be Googled. People can go and do the extra research if they'd like. But I think you'll be fascinated by some of these things that a lot of us would love to research if we had the time. Well, here it is in a story format that I think will really pique your interest and get you started. And I do not want to ruin the couple of surprises that are in that book. I won't do that, but I think you will find it eminently satisfying. And those surprises are in keeping with biblical account, the biblical Christian principles. I think it will be a very enriching journey for some people to get through this story. I think they'll really like it.
You know, as we start to tie out of this fantastic interview, Paul, curiosity for myself, and really more so of a hypothetical situation, rather. Now, I think I know the answer to this question for you. I'm really more so interested in how things play out. First and foremost, is it possible to live in a world that we are able to have religion and science coexisting and actually assisting one another? And if so, what does that world look like? And how do we get there?
That is a phenomenal question, because that's the entire essence of what I'm trying to establish in the book. Yes, in fact, the answer is an emphatic yes. They do go together. Science does bear witness of events that have taken place. The creator of the universe did a magnificent job of creating all of the natural laws that we monitor and measure today. Our ability to reason, our ability to predict in science based on analysis and looking at evidence, all of that applies to faith as well. And the creator, of course, is not limited to the laws he creates. He stands outside of them. But the things that he does, the things that he has done, have displaced the universe, if you will, in certain ways that careful analysis, field work will testify to. I take the Bible very seriously. Bob Cornuke of the Base Institute some years back decided that the account that Luke gives in the book of Acts, chapter 27, where the Apostle Paul and 150 plus other people on an Alexandrian freighter get shipwrecked on Malta, there is an account. Luke was actually a Gentile physician, we believe, and he was very good at recording lots of data. He actually gives the bathymetry of where the boat was. He mentions a place where two seas meet. He talks about seeing a bay with a sandy beach. He basically gives us enough information, and we learn in the story that the island is Malta, that it enabled Bob Cornuke to literally go out and locate the disposition of the four anchors. One had been melted down into diving weights, but I was there in 2004 when two of the four anchors were actually installed in the Maritime Museum there.
Wow.
I mean, it was not a fairy tale. It was absolutely precisely where it was supposed to be. And that's how he found it. And I love the fact that science will give us the assist. We have to have an open mind. I mean, we have to be able to look at an account, make our observations. I mean, there's too much conjecture and too little field work sometimes, where people just want to shut down a concept that is completely plausible. And Bob had spent part of his life as a police detective, so he's a very heavily field-influenced individual. He'll come up with a theory and he wants to check it immediately. Mm-hmm. Scientists often have to find funding to do that. Bob's real good at, once he establishes what he wants to do, including his scientific team, to go out and get it done right away. And that's what I loved doing some of those projects with him. And I've been able to work on things at the location of the real Mount Sinai, which we believe is Jebel al-Lawz in Saudi Arabia. I mentioned the anchors of the Apostle Paul, the actual location of the temple in Jerusalem, the location of Golgotha. I mean, there's so many beautiful things that he has looked into that, it's astounding. And what you find is completely based on a biblical description or a biblical a sensibility of what the text is saying, where we go to look and what questions we ask. I hope I'm not giving too much detail there, but
not at all.
It is fascinating.
Not at all.
I could talk about it for hours.
Paul, listen, you hit it right in the head, man. This is exactly what it is. This is captivating stuff. This is absolutely fascinating. And I could stay here and I could talk to you for hours as well, man. Guys, you know what's even better? Is we are at the end of the interview now. We've covered so much fantastic information, and yet we've barely scratched the surface. I mean, there's still so much left to be discovered. You guys know what you have to do. I'm going to say it once more, even though I know I don't have to, but I'm going to say it again. Here on the line with Paul M. Feidenberg, Ph.D., we just finished discussing his wonderful book, My Neighbor John, available for purchase through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, or his personal site, MyNeighborJohn.com. Find this story as well as so many other fantastic discoveries in the confines of the book. And, listen, guys, the biggest thing that I'm really pulling away from this is it's not one thing or the other. Both can coexist. And at the end of the day, it's not even Paul saying that you should have both of these coexist. I mean, he has his own personal opinion and he feels that way, of course. But ultimately, the decision is up to you. In his book is really just trying to offer a different perspective, trying to open and expand horizons. I absolutely love it. Guys, you know what I'm going to say because I say it all the time. Let's grow, let's develop, and let's educate ourselves. And it starts, truly, with this narrative. Paul, this has been such an honor, man. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.